Good morning. Good morning. We are glad that you're here. I'm Brett, one of the pastors. And if you're a regular at Life Point, one of my favorite parts of the week is getting to hang out with you guys each Sunday. If you're a guest or a visitor, we're so glad that you're here. You picked a great Sunday to join us. A special welcome to the mothers and grandmothers in our lives. We're glad that you're here. So good morning. It's days like this, Mother's Day, these kind of holidays. It just reminds us to kind of slow down and enjoy time with each other. I hope that you get some time to, if your mother is near, my mom and my mother-in-law are all out of town. If your mom is near, I hope you guys get a nice, relaxing, slow lunch and afternoon together. It seems like a small thing. The truth is, it's actually a big deal nowadays. I remember as a kid, every Mother's Day, every big holiday, we would go to Mattoon, Illinois, right? Eastern Illinois, over there by the border of Indiana. And to be quite honest, I kind of loathed it. Like, I was really scared. I didn't like going to Mattoon every year because we would go every year and we would go see my grandma and grandpa, who I love dearly, but I kind of walked away from Mattoon with this impression. I'm sure it's a lovely, lovely city, but I walked away with this impression that it's like 90% senior citizens. Because we would go to the senior home and then we'd go to my grandpa's favorite restaurant, which, as you might imagine, had a lot of other seniors who loved that place. Just the way that they mashed their potatoes, they were nice and soft. We would go play bingo. And no offense if you love bingo. Actually, I really enjoy bingo, but it tends to be a game, at least in where we played it tended to be populated by some of my grandpa's peers. I'll say it like that. So every time we would go to Mattoon and we just I'd ask my parents, what are we gonna do? Let's do something exciting, let's do something fun. And they'd say, Brett, we're gonna visit. We're gonna go see your grandma and grandpa, we're gonna visit. And this was like their code word for you're gonna be bored. Just prepare. It's gonna be older people in a room talking, and the whole time I was just like tugging on their shirts. When do we get to go do something? As a kid, it drove me crazy. These weekends of visiting. But today, I would give almost anything for a nice, slow, relaxing weekend, a nice, slow, relaxing day with the family and plenty of food and family and maybe some checkers in on that, right? It feels like those days are rarer and rarer. And not only does it feel that way, the truth is these days are scarce. Days where we have that extra time, days where we can slow down. We, in general, as a culture, we are busier than ever. I know that some of you don't raise your hands, but some of you have that affliction where even when you're at a family event, even when you're at Christmas or Thanksgiving or Mother's Day with the family, like you can't help but pull out the phone and answer that email for work or text the coworker about this idea or take down notes for some ideas for the next meeting. Like, we're so busy. In fact, in our culture, it's become normal just to say, when somebody asks, how you doing? We answer by saying, busy. I'm so busy, crazy busy. And we get one of two kind of standard responses to that. Either you compliment them or you compare yourself with them. You're like, oh yeah, busy. Oh man, you should have seen my week, right? And we start to compare schedules. Or you kind of compliment them. Oh, you're busy? Hey, better than the opposite, right? Yeah? It's a good problem to have, that's what we say. The truth is, though, in all of our busyness, what is it doing for us? Harvard put together a study a couple of years ago about our busyness. And they actually came to find that busyness, that feeling and looking and being busy, having a lack of leisure time, they called it the new status symbol. It used to be that sociologists would talk about conspicuous consumption. When you bought big rings, big cars, kind of these scarce items to tell the world around you that you were important. Look, I can afford this car or this purse or this extravagant vacation. But in the research that Harvard put together, they found that nowadays it's less about how much leisure time you have or your great vacations or your great scarce items. It's the lack of leisure time that we use to impress others. It's our busyness that we use to impress others. We say, I don't care about scarce items. I'm a scarce commodity. Therefore, I'm valuable. And even our busyness becomes a status symbol, a way of feeling important or projecting a sense of importance to the world around us. And for all of our busyness, though, what do we get? Doctors say we get anxiety, we get weight gain, we get stress. Jesus says that busyness can steal our joy from us, and can rob the word of God in our lives. The truth is we're busying ourselves to death. One pastor, Pete Scazzaro, says it like this: you can't live life at warped speed and not expect to have a warped soul. Join me in the book of Luke. If you grabbed one of our house Bibles, I'll be on page 869, Luke chapter 10. You can open up in your own Bible, grab the house Bible. As always, that's our gift to you if you need a Bible that you can read, or follow along on the screen behind me. We're continuing our series called Beyond the Fence, asking the question, what does it mean to be a good neighbor? Jesus summarized the law and the prophets like this: love God and love your neighbor. And one of the big ideas of our series has been that those aren't two unrelated ideas. It's not an either or proposition. It's both. We love God well by loving our neighbor well. This is the brass tacks. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is the bottom line. Are we loving our neighbor well as an overflow of our love for God? Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And the truth is, as busy people, time is the one thing we don't have, but we know that love takes time. To love our neighbors well is going to take an investment in time. Love and hurry are incompatible. We want to look at two people today and then take some time to reflect on ourselves. Look at a woman named Martha. We're going to look at her sister named Mary. And then we'll just kind of talk among ourselves, if that's okay, for a little bit. Let's jump in verse 38, chapter 10, verse 38. Now, as they, Jesus and his disciples, went on their way, Jesus entered a village. A woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. But one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. I can't help as I read that encounter to think of a friend named Zakra. Zakra was an Afghan refugee. We met her while we were living in Athens, working with refugees at a refugee. She had fled from Afghanistan, fled war and violence and poverty with her 3 young kids, hoping to find a future, a hope, something for them. And when she got to Athens, she found nothing there. And so she ended up coming to our refugee ministry center, kind of a drop-in center where people get food and clothing. And more than anything, Zakra got a community of people that knew her and cared about her. After some time, Zakra was able to find some work. She cleaned the school after hours and saved and saved and saved. And after some months of this, she invited my family over for dinner. And she invited a few other families of people that we worked with from the ministry center over for dinner at her house because she wanted to repay in just a small symbolic way all that she'd received from the ministry center. I say that Zakra invited us to her house, but the truth was she was a refugee, right? She lived in an abandoned building. She was squatting in an abandoned home, no windows, no glass in the windows. The door couldn't close all the way, the front door. Graffiti on the bare concrete walls. But Zakra had taken this place where her and her 3 children lived and made it as beautiful and as welcoming as possible. She swept everything. She cleaned everything. She laid out a beautiful rug and pillows for us to sit on. And she poured tea for each of us. And she served us and she welcomed us in. And next thing we know, Zakra went back into the kitchen where she had a little camping stove. And she's gone for about 30 minutes. We're drinking our tea and we're talking and just kind of wondering what happened to Zakra. But we knew she was preparing some things. Next thing we know, she brings out the plates. And Zakra had collected the best plates from all of her friends. We had like a mismatched set. But she didn't have enough plates, and she didn't have nice plates, so she collected a plate from one friend, 2 plates from another. This friend had 3 plates. This friend had some nice china she borrowed. And then she came out with the rice, and then chicken, and then a salad, and then more rice, and another dish, and more salad and sweets. And it was a feast, right? It was a great meal. The only thing missing from our time together was our friend Zakra. Right? She was so busy preparing the food, so busy serving, so busy making a hospitable environment for us as a way to honor us that we didn't actually get the one thing we came for, which was more time with our friend. I can't help it but wonder if that wasn't a little bit of the case of what it meant to eat at Martha's place. Right? Martha was doing good work. She was being hospitable. She was serving. She was making the house ready. But in all of her good work, she missed out on something better. She was distracted in all of her good work. That's the word that really hits me between the eyes as I read through this text. In verse 40, Martha was distracted with much serving. The word in the Greek means to be pulled around by other things. She's being pulled around by this need and this thing and that thing that's demanding her attention. The thing about busyness isn't just the activity. I think about the activity of busyness a lot, but the real power of busyness is that it distracts us. Some of us live distracted lives, even in those minutes where it's a little quieter, even those moments where we have a little bit of free time where, let me pull out my phone and play a game for a little bit, text somebody, respond to an email. Let me even check off some things on my chore list just to get some things done. I want to redeem that time. I want to stay busy. And all of our activity, we can live distracted lives. I think of it like this sometimes. Every time we say yes to one thing, it means we're going to say no to something else. It means that we're going to have to it's going to make a choice for us. Every yes is a no to something else. Every yes to a good thing is a no to something else. And sometimes we find ourselves in life with no margin, no space, no room to add anything else. And the next thing we know, we've said no to something better. We've said no to something more. Love and hurry are incompatible. Jesus says, love your neighbor, and some of us underneath our breath mumble no. Sometimes not audibly, sometimes not even consciously, but we've so busied our lives, we've so distracted our hearts, we don't have anything left over. We don't have any margin. There's nothing left. Sometimes our busyness has predetermined our disobedience. I can relate to Martha, right? I look at her here and she's busy and she's serving and she's preparing the meal and this place and being hospitable. I can relate to that. And sometimes I kind of want to join her in being a little embittered at Mary, who's just sitting at Jesus' feet, just listening to him teach. Lazy. I can relate to Martha, but part of what I think we need to hear is the reminder that what Mary's doing is the more difficult choice. You might say, she's sitting at his feet. What's hard work about that? But the truth is, Mary had to say no to something. Martha said yes to everything that pulled her in every which direction, but Mary had to be able to say no. Mary had to be able to set a boundary. And some of us know how hard it can be to keep a boundary. Mary had to get rid of those distractions so that she could sit at Jesus' feet, so that she could hear him teach. She had all the same cultural pressure on her to serve, to be hospitable, to care for everyone's needs. But at some point, she realized if she kept saying yes to everything, she wouldn't be able to sit at her master's feet. Some of us know how hard it can be to say no. Some of us have that same problem. We can't say no. We can't say no to work. And so we're writing emails where our kids are trying to talk to us. We're writing text messages. We're dealing with office politics at home. Some of us can't say no to sports, whether it's watching sports or attending the next event or spending all of our money on sports. Some of us can't say no to our kids. We feel mean, we feel bad. But the truth is, our kids need to see us model healthy boundaries. Our kids need to see us say no to the right thing so we can say yes to something better. Some of us can't say no to church. And I know it might sound strange for a pastor to say, but the truth is, some of us busy our lives with activities, even good things at the church, make it really hard to follow what Jesus has asked us to do. I have a friend from a church I used to serve at where 3 days a week, 3 evenings a week, he was at things at the church. 2 evenings a week, he volunteered at another ministry. And every other week, for one evening, he volunteered at a third Bible study. And you might say, look at him, he's on fire for the Lord. But if you can't keep the main thing, if you can't do what Jesus has asked you to do to love God and love your neighbor, if you can't be available to your neighbor, if you're not ever there for your family or your neighbors, it should be a red flag. It should be a red flag. Jesus in verse 41 responds, he answers Martha and says, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. The hard part about that verse, I don't think is the word necessary. Many of us know that we need God in our lives. If you're here today, you probably know that you need more God in your life. I've talked to successful businessmen who have made millions who acknowledge, I need more God. I've talked to people who are homeless and broke and addicted, say, I need more God. I talk to people who are in church every single week, and they can acknowledge the necessity of God in their lives. And I talk to people who haven't shown up to church for years, and they'll say, I know I need more Jesus. The tough part here isn't the necessity, it's this idea of one thing. We're okay with Jesus being a thing. We're okay with Jesus being a priority among everything else we're doing. We're okay with Jesus being a way, a value, a good teacher. But that's not what he asks us here. He said he celebrates Mary because she knew that one thing is necessary. One thing. If you're here this morning, whether you're a guest or came with a friend, maybe you're dragged here by someone else, and you're not sure what you make of all this Jesus stuff yet. If you don't consider yourself a Christian or a follower of Jesus, you can just relax for a second. It's okay. I want to talk to those of you who call yourself Christians. If we call ourselves a follower of Jesus. What's up, guys? How we doing? Everybody's okay? Okay. Here's the thing. We get it when the world around us, when those who don't know Jesus struggle to make God their one thing. But as followers of Jesus, sometimes I think we're kidding ourselves because we give the lip service. We say that God is important to us. We say that we want to follow Jesus, but our lives, they say a different story. And our neighbors aren't fooled. Our kids aren't fooled. Don't be surprised 20 years later when our kids act like following Jesus is a joke. Don't be surprised when those around us think our faith is a joke to them after seeing our lives again and again and again, not making God the priority, not keeping our eyes on that one thing. The truth is that in order to keep the main thing, we're gonna have to forego some important things. And some of us aren't willing to forego a late night on Saturday in order to be together with your church family more than once a month. Some of us aren't willing to forego another activity for the kids to get them to student ministries on Sunday night. Some of us aren't willing to forego episode 14 of season 36 of The Big Bang Theory, right? We just can't miss that one to get the life group. The truth is our lives betray our priorities. Our lives betray if Jesus is just a thing or if he's our one thing. Everybody can listen again. Thank you for a few of you, I know we're plugging your ears, I appreciate that. Love and hurry are incompatible. And sometimes we're gonna have to forego some good things so that we can make our main thing the main thing. We live in a busy world, an instant world, right? I could pull out my phone here and I could order lunch. I could, within a minute, have news from across the world. I could FaceTime with my brother who lives in California, right? We have an instant world. Everything's at our fingertips. And yet we're reminded and we know that the most important things, the most valuable things take time to cultivate. The relationships around us that matter take time to cultivate. Loving our neighbors will take time to cultivate. Raising our kids well may be an inconvenience at times. It may take time to cultivate. Growing in our faith, following Jesus may take some time to cultivate. The question is, are we living lives that are available to God? We live in a Martha world. We live in a busy world. We live in a demanding world. And I think one of the reminders that we need is we need a few more Marys. We need a few more people who will stand against the tide of culture, who will stand against the incessant pressures of another thing to do, another distraction, something pulling us in a different direction. And we'll make our main thing the main thing. I want you to, if you have your notes from the flash sheet, write these down. These are 3 tools, 3 questions I want you to ask yourself about this upcoming week. Here's the first one. In order to make our main thing the main thing, we need to remember our yes. We need to remind ourselves again and again, what are we saying yes to? Maybe it's put it on the mirror so you can see it every day. Put that little verse that says, I'm gonna love God and love my neighbor. I'm gonna keep my main thing the main thing. Maybe I confessed to the first service that if I wanted to see it every day, I'd have to put it on my refrigerator. It's all right, it's okay. We're among friends. Put it on your refrigerator. We're not gonna judge you. Maybe you gotta put it in your wallet. So every time you open your wallet, it reminds you to keep the main thing the main thing. Here at Life Point, we love to talk about having a growing relationship with Jesus. We need to remind ourselves of that yes, that we've said yes to that growing relationship with Jesus, because the truth is it doesn't happen by accident. Stephen Covey used to love to say, the main thing is keeping the main thing the main thing. We can talk about having a main thing, but if we don't keep it our main thing, it's just talk. The second thing we should talk about is eliminating time stealers, right? We need to declutter some space in our lives to have space for some better things. We may need to cut some good things in order to be able to focus our eyes and the priorities of our heart on some better things. For me, it's TV before 9 p.m., right? It's just not worth it anymore. Before the kids go to bed, there may be a good show on. There might be something I'd enjoy watching, but I can't do it. It takes away from something better. For you, maybe it's games on your phone. I know people who've had to take off all the games, all the apps, the game apps on their phone because they end up distracted, end up not in the moment, end up farming carrots on Farmville or whatever you do instead of being present in the moment. Maybe for you, it's say no to work past 5 p.m. No, I finish at 5 and I leave the office and I come back in the morning. There's something more important than fighting for the next promotion. Maybe it's the number of activities that are on our kids' all ever-growing list of things to do. Things we don't want to deprive them of the opportunity, just in case my kid is a world-class gymnast. I don't want to make him miss out on the 2024 Olympics, right? Now, look, my kid is not going to be a great gymnast. I can't do anything about it. Let's be realistic, though, and set them on a path where the main thing is the main thing. So we need to remember our yes. We need to eliminate time stealers. And the third thing we might want to remember, a tool that we might need to consider in our lives, Well, you guys know that love doesn't always happen at a convenient time. If you've got kids, you know that their time that they need from you doesn't always come when you have time to give. Your neighbor asks you for help on a project and is saying, hey, I need you. Usually happens when our lives are as busy as can be, when work is demanding, when everything's pulling for our attention. So thirdly, we need to be interruptible, because some of us are so busy we can't be interrupted, or some of us project. Back to what we were saying earlier, it's a sense of importance to be busy. We project so much busyness that our neighbor would never dare bother us, that our kids would never dare bother us, because they know we're keeping our main thing. And from their perspective, that's work, or that's the car in the garage fixing it up, or that's whatever it is that's demanding our time. Sometimes we are so stretched so thin with all the yeses that even if we don't intend this, our lives communicate a big no to everyone around us. Sometimes we busy ourselves with so many yeses, even if our hearts would want otherwise, our kids are already hearing a no. Our neighbor is already hearing a no. God already knows our priorities. Last week, if you were here, Danny introduced us to an acronym called BLESS, right? This is a way that as we seek to be a good neighbor, seek to love our neighbors as ourselves, this is just some practical tools, right? So we said begin with prayer. Pray for our neighbors. Pray for our blocks. We have that map out front where we're putting the pins where we live, just as a visual reminder of the neighborhoods that are being prayed for around the city. So begin with prayer and listen to your neighbor. Take some time to eat with them. Eating is, food makes everything, right? I was telling our staff earlier, food is the difference between a meeting and a party. I said, we're having a party today because we have food, right? Eat with them. Hear their story. Build a relationship. The next part there, though, is to serve. Maybe as you're eating, you find a way that you can demonstrate the love of Christ to them. And as the door opens, share your story. Today, I want to ask you to kind of narrow in on listen and eat. Narrow in on these two because they are two that take time. More than anything else, they take time to listen to what's really going on in your neighbor's life, to see yourself move from a stranger to an acquaintance to actually having a relationship where you know how you can pray for them. It takes listening. That just takes time. And eating might take some food or some coffee, but more than anything in our culture, it just means sacrificing some time. And hold on, you as my neighbor, you're more valuable than the next activity. Get a chance to share a cup of coffee with you. Actually, I suggest you buy your own cup of coffee, two separate cups of coffee. But sharing that moment with them, that communicates infinitely more than the busyness of our schedule. This week I ask you to begin praying, but actually to take that next step and to listen to their story, to find a time to eat with your neighbors. Maybe throw a barbecue. Invite those that live around you over. And maybe you're here today and you say, why bother, Brett? Well, why bother? I hear all this, but why? And the truth is, I can't guilt you into this. I can tell you what Jesus says, but I can't change your heart on it. All I can do when you ask the question why is to point you to the story of Jesus himself, to point you to the life of Jesus. But what I've experienced is that as I look at Jesus, who humbled himself to come and serve, who made himself available to us, who died in our place and for our sins, God does something in my heart. God opens me up to others. God says, hold on, you can live a life of self-giving love. You could sacrifice some time. And all of a sudden, it's not a burden that weighs on my shoulders, another thing I have to do. It actually becomes a joy when we keep our eyes on Jesus, when we keep our hearts centered on the gospel and what Jesus has done for us. Loving our neighbors can actually become a source of joy and refreshment in our lives.